Today's reading is from Hebrews chapter 12, verses 14 to 24. Make every effort to live in peace with everyone and to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one falls short of the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. See that no one is sexually immoral or is godless like Esau, who for a single meal sold his inheritance rights as the oldest son. Afterwards, as you know, when he wanted to inherit this blessing, he was rejected. Even though he sought the blessing with tears, he could not change what he had done. You have not come to a mountain that can be touched and that is burning with fire, to darkness, gloom, and storm, to a trumpet blast, or to such a voice speaking words that those who heard it begged that no further word be spoken to them, because they could not bear what was commanded. If even an animal touches the mountain, it must be stoned to death. The sight was so terrifying that Moses said, I am trembling with fear. But you have to come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly, to the church of the firstborn whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God, the judge of all, to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel.
There's a little bit. Yep, go for it.
Oh, okay. See to it that you do not refuse him who speaks. If they did not escape when they refused him, who warned them on earth? How much less will we if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven? At that time, his voice shook the earth, but now he has promised, once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. The words once more indicate the removing of what can be shaken, that is, created things, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire.
Thank you, Donna Jean, so much. Move that right there. Thank you. So we're nearing the end of our journey into the book of Hebrews. And last week, when we got to do the first part of this chapter, it got to talk. It landed perfectly on Father's Day, if you remember that. Speaking about God as a father, and today we're doing something a little bit different. I'm going to control my own slides, and we're all, as you can see, we've all kind of joined up here today for our time together. And I'm going to just invite you guys that in this time together, as we've gathered up, and to remember that we are not alone, right? We're not alone. Sometimes we feel like we are walking in this journey by ourselves. And I know that you guys are some of the most friendly, warm, and loving people, and I can feel the Spirit of God just coming from you as I have conversations with you all. And then we come into the sanctuary, and we just kind of fan out and sit alone. And yet that is not the heart and experience that I think that we have when we are gathered up in the foyer or the fellowship hall or our Sunday school classes. We really do like each other. So it's really kind of funny to me that We do these activities and we all love each other. And I realize how much we hang out even after activities. Like, oh, we're going to go to this thing for an hour and a half, but we end up hanging out for 2 hours afterwards. But then on Sunday morning we come together and we just fan out in the sanctuary. So thank you for gathering up today. And so here's the question that I've got for us to start out, and that is, what is the hardest part of your trust with Jesus? What's the hardest part? Because we've been seeing that as we walk through the book of Hebrews, right? As we're walking through the book of Hebrews, our writer's been picking up on all these different areas that can rival our trust in Jesus, because we start to trust in other things, right? There's this whole thing about, he's like, trust in Jesus. He's greater than the law. Trust in Jesus. He's greater than Moses. Trust in Jesus. He's greater than the priests. Trust in Jesus. He's greater than Melchizedek. Trust in Jesus. He is greater than an animal sacrifice. Trust in Jesus. So there's all of these things that the Jewish people had grown up in their tradition and religion, and they trusted in all of these things. And our writer of Hebrews is saying, trust in Jesus. He is greater than all of it. It's not that those things he hasn't used. He has used animal sacrifice in the past. He's used priests. He's used Moses. He's used the law. And then he's come to fulfill it, right? And the whole time, our writer has been breaking down these things that people trust in that will rival a full trust of Jesus. And so for us, what's the hardest part of your life to trust Jesus with? And we might sit there and be like, I've never participated in animal sacrifice. I've never, thought that Moses was that big of a deal, because we didn't grow up Jewish 2,000 years ago. Like, those aren't our struggles, right? But maybe these are things that we could relate a little bit more to. What's the hardest part of your life to trust Jesus with? What about career plans and professional life? I will tell you, that was my big, huge struggle. If you know my testimony of really laying my heart down with Jesus, was I had my career plans. I had a professional life all figured out for me, and I wasn't interested in what Jesus had for me because I kind of thought I knew. Goals and ambitions, right? Some of you might say, I really want to accomplish this and nothing will get in my way. Well, what if Jesus got in your way? You know what I mean? What would you do then? I struggled with that one as well. Your social life. Maybe you're like, okay, I give Jesus Sunday morning, I give Jesus this and this and this, but he doesn't get to touch my social life. And maybe your social life is your life online, like a media life. I don't know. What about your love life? Sometimes we're like, I trust Jesus with everything, but my love life. I trust Jesus with everything, but my family life. Or maybe you say, I do trust him with my family life, but I'm not trusting him with my social life. So on here, you might say, oh, I let him have these things, but there's a couple of things on this list I don't let him have. What about your health? Do we trust him with our health? Do we trust him with our finances? Do we trust him with provision? Is he a God who's going to provide? And then what about your private life? Do you really think that your private life is private from God? Well, probably not. If you think about it, your private life might be private from everyone else, but it is not private from Jesus. He sees that part, And so when we give our life to Jesus, the reality is we give him all of it. We give him all of it. And sometimes we might have the intention that we give it all to him, but as we walk with him, we realize we haven't given him all of it. And he's like, okay, you have a saving faith, you're with me, but you've never given me this part of your life, and I'm asking for it now. Trust me, give me at least a chunk of it. Give me a part of your social life. Give me a part of your love life. Give me this goal. Give me this ambition. Give me this one, And God is going to slowly bring us closer and closer to him and his heart. And again, I will tell you that the closer you get to him, the things that you want, the things you think are important, will adjust at times to what he wants. And then you don't miss the things that you once wanted because now you want what he wants. It's so cool like that. So you really don't feel like you lost. Let me tell you, you feel like you won because you're free from the powers of other things. So it really is. It is a trust journey of letting him have those things. And we saw that with, it would have looked different in the book of Hebrews. We would be going through all these chapters about law and Moses and priests and angels and all of these things that we've covered, animal sacrifices. Their trust was in these other things, and they had to give those pieces over. And it's a breakdown, and it's a process walking with him. And so when we look at this passage that we're walking through today, in verse 14, where Donna Jean first started with us, in whole, it's about, he talks about live in peace together, right? Live in peace together. And it sure seems complicated when you are watching the news, right? Especially what's been going on, right? Peace just feels like, how do you achieve peace? In our world, there's this concept of sometimes like, achieving peace is trying to beat the enemy at their own game, right? And when you look at God's walkthrough of Scripture, there's a lot of battles, and He does call people into battle. He does. He calls the book of Joshua is a lot of battle. And the battle is for what? To accomplish peace. But things are constantly being fulfilled, and God deals with things differently as we go. And so we are to be at peace together. But the reality is, when it really comes down to understanding peace, the world's understanding and definition of peace is radically different than our understanding of peace. So man's quest for peace is often absent of the Prince of Peace, if you think about it. Like, it's absent of the Prince of Peace, who Jesus is, by the way. Jesus is the Prince of Peace. And we don't go by way of him a lot. But what makes us the church is that we do get to find peace by way of the Prince of Peace. And we get to see this. Jesus says in John 14:27, he tells us, peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid, right? God is offering peace. His peace looks different than the rest of the world. And what I think is remarkable here is where Jesus hits on this concept of fear, right? Jesus knows that a lack of peace in the world is from an increase of fear, right? When we pop on the TV, when we look at our social media sites, it's giving us fear and concern. Sometimes there's the little tag, on something like, if you have these symptoms, click this button and find out what you have. And you're like, oh my gosh, I have those symptoms. What? Like, something's wrong with me, And so fear is always the way of kind of like selling a product, getting us to think a certain way. But boy, oh boy, isn't fear handy that way, And so Jesus, looks at that and is like, I don't offer that kind of fear. We are going to talk about fear, though, today, that we got to hear about, and that was the fear of the Lord, right? Because Israel, was afraid to touch the mountain. Not even an animal. Nothing could touch the mountain where they died. And that was not a fear like a boogeyman kind of fear. It wasn't that kind of fear. It was fear as in having awe and respect for God, who's holy and good, and knowing he's good, right? And the reality that we're not. And so we're going to talk more about that. But Jesus knows that a lack of peace in the world is from an increase of fear. And so our hope is in him, and to operate by way of him and see what kind of peace he's calling for. So there's peace in us having peace amongst people. It doesn't mean we have to condone everything out in the world. That's not what it means. But sometimes peace is something that is a personal journey, right? And we're not feeling peace. We're feeling the anxiety and the struggle and the fear. And we probably, each of us could sit down and say, I've got some really good reason for it. But God's still one who is looking to offer us this incredible sense of peace. So then when we jumped into verse 15, 15 was saying, it said to make sure that no one falls away. He's like, have peace together. Make sure no one falls away. You can tell that our writer of Hebrews is starting to wrap his letter up, right? He's got one chapter to go. He's wrapping it up. And so he does tell them, be at peace together. Make sure no one falls away. And so you can go to church your whole life and still fall away. Isn't that kind of sad to think about? You might be physically attending church, but spiritually you can still fall away and not be with him. All you have to do is to start to trust as the world trusts, and then you'll start to live as the world lives, and soon you will not know Jesus' peace. And I think that that's actually very common in the church if you think about it, right? We get wrapped up in the fears of the world, and then we start to sort and trust like the world trusts, and then we live like the world lives because we have the same concerns as the rest of the world. That God's like, why are you concerned about that? You know I have you. You know I'm a God who provides. You know I'm a God who's always present. You know I am a God who fulfills these things. But you're trusting in this other stuff, and you don't have the peace that Jesus offers because we think that peace comes from all these other things as the world is seeking. And so we start to look more and more like the world. And that's pretty hard. And so it really does start small. It starts small in that we start to trust like the world based out of our fear, and we slowly start to fall away from trusting in Jesus. But also, we slowly can get our way back, right? It's trusting him in areas and making our way back to him. And so what is the hardest part of your life to trust Jesus with? And so this is going to keep popping up there. Every time you look at it, maybe something else jumps out at you. And that is, what does it really look like? I think something to notice is that these guys are all interrelated in some way. They are. If I am going to not trust Jesus with my career plans, right, and I have my own goals and ambitions, that's going to radically adapt my family life, right? People will say like, oh, we have family members that are never present at activities because they're always so goal driven and career driven that they don't stop and make time for us. That's what that whole Silver Spoon song's even about, if you know that song. You know what I'm saying? This whole, the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, little boy blue and the man in the moon, right? Daddy, when are you going to come home? I don't know when, but we'll get together then. And so that is not the Father that we have, right? Like, God is not driven in any direction but towards you, right? And so any manner of these things will affect the other thing. You know that sometimes when we get sometimes really, really worked up over our social life, sometimes our health will start to fail. You know what I mean? We get wrapped up in one thing, and what happens is it takes from the other thing, doesn't it? You get really stuck on one, it takes from another category of your life. But here's what's cool. If you give all of it to Jesus, if all of it is him, do you think this balances out? It does. If he has your love life and he has your social life and he has your career, if you are really giving that and trusting him with it, they balance out. They work out. And that's what it means when we say he's Lord of our life. Maybe you have to say he's Lord of my lives because you've got multiple. When you start to give him all of it, these start to work out, right? So the next thing that we looked at in Scripture was the story of Esau. Esau gets brought up, and here's a moment where it becomes very individualistic. And when Donna Jane was reading about Esau, the point there was, do not be someone who takes God's grace for granted, or you'll miss out on his grace in the end. So remember, Esau was like super hungry, and rather than just like having a shorty little fast and going and fixing himself something to eat, he told Jacob like, hey, give me some of that stew. And Jacob's like, for your inheritance. And he's like, fine. You know what I mean? So like, we've all had that moment where we were driving home and we were like, I could go home and cook something to eat, and it would cost me about $2.50 because it's a grocery store. I already shopped it, and I'm hungry for a little bit more time. Or I could drive through a drive-through restaurant and have instant gratification, right? Now, so let's just say you made the choice to go through the drive-through. Say you're going through the drive-through and you're like, seriously, I'm starving. I just really want a hamburger and some fries or whatever it is you think you're ordering. And they say it will cost you your retirement. Would you do it? Do I see a yes out there? No, you're not going to just like give your retirement to McDonald's. You're at that point going to drive home and you're going to cook your $2.50, food at home that's sitting in the refrigerator, right? It's just so I want you to think about that. That's how ridiculous Esau was. Like, that's how ridiculous he was. Like, he could have had all of this, but he wanted instant gratification. He just cared about what was in front of him right now, and he let his feelings and his appetite rule, not God. He let his appetite rule. That's what it's like to be part of the world. God is saying, don't let your appetite rule. Like, let me be Lord of your life. And granted, it just calls for self-discipline, which is what this is all being laid on top of, because that was the first half of this chapter, right? Have some self-discipline. Don't let your appetite rule, parent that. You have a good father who's been parenting that. And then, you'll enjoy the inheritance. You'll enjoy the retirement. You'll enjoy that second part, because otherwise you're going to miss out on that. You're going to really miss out on that. And Esau did. Esau, he wanted it all in the end, and he had blown it. He'd blown it. He drove through McDonald's and he gave up his retirement for a hamburger because he wouldn't go home and heat something up that would cost $2.50 out of his refrigerator. That's how ridiculous it is. But he kind of thought like, oh, I should get all of it. And that's not how it works. That's not real. That's not life, right? And so I appreciate that our writer like pulls it onto this personal level. And so then part of us, when we think about like what part is hardest to trust Jesus with, it really does have to do with what we take for granted, right? Our writer of Hebrew was saying Esau took God's grace for granted. And in the end, he learned he couldn't take it for granted. He didn't get the inheritance. He didn't get it. He got nothing in the end. So how can taking God's grace for granted be related to how we trust him with parts of our lives, right? So it didn't flick this time. Hello. What? Why didn't it flick? Okay, I'll replug in, I guess. Interesting. I'm wireless at the moment. I love wireless things. So we'll just plug in and see what happens here. Because otherwise I'll lose all my slides. Here we go. Has it found it? Let's go again. Okay. Interesting. We have not had this problem yet, even when we do a board meeting. Let it refind it. Don't we love technology? It's great stuff, man.
Try plugging it in again. Unplug it, plug it back in.
I did. Yeah. Oh yeah, I just replugged and I just selected it again. That's just annoying. I don't know. We do this all the time. What? I don't know. I had it on the first one because that's what the HDMI was set into. That's super strange. Why would it randomly do that? Okay, well, Brad, can you go ahead and grab up there then? Okay, so then we'll go up on top. I don't know why. Oh, you know what it is? It is not finding the office Wi-Fi. Well, it is on office Wi-Fi, but it probably shouldn't be. I wonder if it changed Wi-Fi's. So my computer's on one and this is now on the other. I don't know. But that's really random to just not work. Well, here we go, guys. Here we go. Okay. That's so random. Okay. Okay. So with Esau, it's really set on this very personal level that we look at. And so when we look at that, and we know that, it's loud, that there is this whole part of taking things for granted is related to trust, right? Go ahead and click that next slide. There we go. That was the one. It just would not let me go there. So how can taking God's grace for granted be related to how we trust him with parts of our lives? Sometimes we can think like, oh, it's okay. I don't have to, trust Jesus with this part of my life because I know he loves me and he'll forgive me later. And then we don't trust him. Like, grace can't be an excuse to not trust him. So when we look at that list, how many of those things up there, it's the same list as before, do we say, you know what? I know he loves me and he's a graceful God, so I don't have to trust him with this part of my life because he's going to love me in the end. Now, granted, yes, he does love you in the end. Let me just tell you, Esau had a hard story after that, though, because he didn't get the inheritance. He didn't get the birthright. The word is despised. He despised it. It didn't have real value. And so God knows if it doesn't have real value to you. So that's that thing, is that when we choose to trust as the world trusts in other things and not to do the hard part of trusting Jesus with parts of our lives, we do take his grace for granted. And so you might look at that and say, I trust Jesus with everything but my love life, and then you take his grace for granted when it comes to your love life. You know what I'm saying? You're like, I'm calling all the shots when it comes to that. I will live as the world lives. I will do as I want. Jesus has his own ideas. I just think they're old, and I'm not going to trust him with that part. But I know he's a loving God, and he is full of grace, and his grace will pour over me in that area. Well, that is taking his grace for granted. That's what it is. And you'll find that everything else seems to fall out of sorts. That's the hard part of walking with Jesus, is realizing that to follow him, we got to follow it all so that all parts are in line with what he has for us. Then we move on to this next part. You can grab that next slide for me, where it starts to talk about, we go from Esau, a personal experience, one person, and this chapter moves now to talking about the nation of Israel and how they come to the mountain. And the mountain, there is fear, but it's a holy and good fear. It's realizing that God is good and he is perfect and we're not, but he still wants to be in relationship with us. But as a corporate group, they come to realize that, yes, they're individuals, but they're also together. And that's part of where it's like, yes, we are all individuals, but today let's sit and be together. Like, we should be together. The activities we have going on all summer involve us being together. They all involve us being together. And because there's a part of that is powerful, in that God wants to move in your life as an individual, but he wants to move with us as a group. He wants to move with us as a church. And as a church, if we are together, we can affect and care for an individual. And as an individual, we do affect the whole of the group. We really do. And so amongst the fear and excitement of the presence of God, we also have, as read to us in verses 22 to 24, you can grab the next slide, the angels. The angels are fully aware of the holiness and the perfection and the beauty of God, and that should create a fear. But it's not the fear that the world has. It's not the same. So we would operate on a whole different basis of understanding, right? The angels cry out, holy, holy, holy. When we were singing that just here a little bit ago, and the song Open the Eyes of My Heart, do you realize that there's angels who are like, oh yeah, let's do another round of that? Because they're singing it. They're singing it all the time because they know that he is good and he's holy and he is set apart. And we get to be in that, in his presence. We get to be in that. So go ahead, grab that next slide. So what does it look like to take Jesus for granted? It looks like not trusting him. It looks like saying, oh, I know he'll forgive me later. And I'm not going to give him this part of my life. This part of my life is for me. And so when we look at that, what is the hardest part? And why do we think that God can't handle everything? We're going to come back to that with this chapter. And so we are going to talk about something hard, and that's this. So this was our May tithing and expenses. And so I told you guys last week that we had sat down as a board and we looked at our numbers again. And we talk about it, we pray about it. I will talk about tithing and giving as you feel led to give. And I don't know if that hits or if there's like a deep prayer of like, Lord, if you're calling me to give, like, let me give. What is it that I need to give? In your newsletters, the tithes and expenses are written in. But what you can see here is that there's a huge lack of trust. That's what I see when I look at these things, a lack of trust that we have a good God that wants to take care of us. So our tithes in May came to $1,587. Now I know what I tithe, and I know what other person tithes. And so I know where that first 1,000 comes from. So that means from the rest of the church, we're just coming up with that 587. And I'm not to know what anyone else tithes. I'm going to know what I tithe, and I happen to know what someone else tithes. But when the rest of the church collectively is coming up with $587, it translates to this, that we don't trust that God is a God who provides for us personally. So our church expenses, in all the very large churches I've worked in, the expenses are fantastically low in my book, but our expenses are $7,137.97. And you might look at that and go, why are our expenses $7,137.95? Now, when you think about what your own expenses are, and you're like, well, you've got to pay insurance. The church has to pay insurance too. Our insurance payment is $1,800. When you look at this, our tithes, we're not even covering the building insurance. You think about how you've got like internet bill and phone bill, and you got to keep the water on, and you need toilet paper, and you need to keep the electricity on. You've got utilities, right? The church has utilities also. Just basic office and kitchen supplies, ministry supplies, missional giving, denominational dues. I think that sometimes people might think that the church gets its funding from the denomination, from the district assembly. It's the other way around. We pay the district assembly. And then it comes out of our pocket. It doesn't reverse. So the only money that we have to operate and function as a church is what we tithe, is what we're willing to give. That's all we have to operate on. And we can't operate on $1,587. We can't operate on that. And then salaries as well. But what's being paid to those who are on staff is radically low for the amount of work that they do. And so when you look at that, we want to say, oh, God can do anything. We just have to have faith. But look at Esau. If he had no faith, he was allowed to fall. This is the thing, is that can God, suddenly strip our expenses down to $1,587? He shouldn't have to. That's a mark that we don't trust him with our lives personally. We're not personally walking with him and saying, all right, Lord, there's a part of my life that I have kept from you. And probably what's there is fear like the rest of the world, right? Fear like the rest of the world. The world is afraid that it doesn't have enough. The world is afraid it doesn't have enough. And it's hard for us to detach ourselves from that fear and to realize that we don't need to fear like the world fears. Jesus is giving us peace, unlike the rest of the world. And what it also is walking with some ownership in what God is doing and saying, God, I love you and what you're doing. And so I know it probably gets confusing sometimes because we look like we're okay, right? We feel like, I don't have to give. The church looks fine. And go ahead and start flipping some of these slides. Here's the bit. We did have the land sale, right? But here's what I think is not fully communicated. That the church building updates, and then you can flip to that next slide. The parsonage flip to a harbor house with a shelter, that's coming from the land sale. The land sale funds do not pay for our building insurance. It does not pay for the toilet paper around here. It does not keep the electricity on. The way it works with district assembly is the land sale money goes back into the land. And so we were really blessed that back in the 70s, the church, when buying this property, bought this extra property because we were able to sell it and now update parts of this building that really need updating, and also to be able to flip and have a new vision for the parsonage. Turn it into the Harbor House, where the upstairs will offer services to the community for mental health help, tutoring, other various needs, and the downstairs can turn into a shelter. And what a good time for that too, especially with the OYO being, torn down and our community needing more help. And so those funds are used in this manner. It's not like we have this money to keep the church itself going. We could flip the buildings and still go out as a church. You can grab that next one. We do serve at the Chess House, but we serve Chess House for $150 or less a month, right? And because if you're not serving the community, are you really the church? Can you really claim you're the church? You're Jesus's people when you just sit in a pew? You need to be people who serve and love the community. And when you read the book of Acts, that was the big thing that separated them from the rest of the world. People sold their fields, gave their money, and made sure that other people weren't without. And that they cared for people who were even not part of the church. That's what makes the church different. We care for everyone. And so that's part of our identity in Jesus, is that we care for everyone. And so we do this on a very small budget. You can grab that next one. You know that we are excited to start serving hands, right? Where the people who go to Helping Hands, the food bank on Tuesdays, will get to come up here and we'll serve them a hot meal. Well, here's the thing. We got a grant for that. We got a grants team going. We applied for a grant. The money from that goes to being able to feed and care for the community, the people in the community. It doesn't go to the running of the church. The grant money does not contribute at all to office supplies and PUD bills and the internet. It doesn't contribute to any of those things. So while we have the building funds to care for the building and give the building purpose, and we have grant money to serve and feed people, if we can't stay open and as just a basic church with operating, all of it goes away, right? All of it goes away. So let's keep flipping. And I know that seems like a really heavy thing, but sometimes I just want to make sure it's clear. So you can say, but we're doing all this great stuff. Well, we did a mission trip to Ecuador, right? But we raised all of our money and went, right? It was last summer. We raised our funds. We went to Ecuador. This church sent out a team. That's cool and exciting. but tithes didn't contribute to it. We were still trying to pay our PUD bill as a board. You can grab the next one. We have our San Francisco mission trip coming up. But again, this is us raising our funds to get to go. We could still raise our funds and go, and the church could still close if we can't pay our insurance bill each month. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's separate funds. And I don't think that we always understand that. And so I just want to make sure that there's a little moment here for some education of understanding this. You can keep going. We have Sunday school, we have a grants team, a media team, a buildings and grounds team, and we're starting a worship team. We're super excited. We'll be kicking off practices in July and having instruments and a whole worship team that surrounds Christina for us to have this. All of these things, it's not like it's this big, fantastic financial bill. We're still moving forward. But again, if we can't pay our basic bills, then there won't be a worship team, and there won't be serving hands, and there won't be a shelter that serves the community. Like, if we really, really want to show this town the love of the heart of God, then we need to show up in the way God is calling us to show up. And sometimes it's in a way of trusting him in ways that we've always felt God's grace is so big, I don't have to trust him this way. His grace is big. But as you see with Esau, the grace tapped out at the point that he wanted his inheritance. He didn't get what he wanted in the end, right? And that's just consequence. Grace doesn't mean you don't deal with consequence. He's a good father. He disciplines those he loves. I love this chapter because it sets it up on such a strong foundation that, like, a good parent still lets you fall. And a good parent teaches you to get yourself back up, is right there with you, but teaches you to get up. And this church has been needing to get up for decades. Honestly, we've been needing to get up for decades and not have excuses to not get up, because this is what's hard for me to hear, is when God's grace becomes the excuse for us to not learn how to get up. And some of you might be sitting here being like, I've not been part of this church for decades. What did I walk into? You walked into a really exciting time, by the way, because I do think that God's Spirit is wanting to just pour out on us, right? Wants to pour out on us. But we have to want to get up with him. We have to want that, right? You can flip again. Wednesday night programs, again, we show up, we have a good time together. It's about us being together. Goes away if we, can't keep going. We want to bless this homeschool co-op that wants to be able to use the building on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That would be such a cool way to love our community and make a connection with people. You guys, it's amazing. But if we can't pay building insurance, then they're going to have to find another place to go. Keep flipping. Thank you. There's this invitation. Hey, Adventures Out. Let's go be together. Let's go take a hike together. Let's break bread together. Let's go be together and go out, together. Invite a friend. Maybe you have a friend who will never step foot in a church, but they'll go to Gustav's, and maybe they'll be able to tell their story and feel loved at that table in that restaurant. And here's the thing. They may not step foot in a church, but guess what? We are the church. And so we get to love them the whole ride down. We get to love them at the restaurant and love them on the way back, right? And that's what we're called to be. And they can walk away saying, wow, like I lost some fear today and I felt a peace I couldn't understand when I was with those people. Because when people have lunch with you, it should be like they got to eat with Jesus. And so these adventures out, they're out because the hope is that you're bringing people who need to engage with the heart of God and know his peace and stop banking on the world's fear and ways of operation in that, and be able to rest in the presence of God, because the church is us, right? We're called to be that. And so they don't have to step foot in the church, maybe the parking lot, to jump into one of our cars. but they get to still experience the heart of God going out with us. So keep going. Make Minimum Hangout, again, an opportunity to hang out with us. And it's randomly in the middle of the day, and I kind of love that. It's stopping to have a little, refreshing time to hang out and be with people, tell their story, be heard, be known. And it's just a simple opportunity to be together. Keep going. The movie night. Again, this is something that we want to do. It's not a tremendous cost, but it's not sometimes that hard to ask somebody like, hey, you want to come to the church? We're watching, we watched Onward on Wednesday, to watch a cartoon film, relax and be with people. It's an opportunity for you to invite people to come and rest with us. And so sometimes we think like, is that really that big of a deal? It actually can be a pretty big deal for some people who never get a break from what their worries and their fears are. And it's not a situation where they're trying to distract themselves from their worries and their fears. They got to sit and be in the presence of people who loved Jesus. You really are. I mean, Christina was saying that we have resurrection power within us. In Jesus, we do. And he wants everyone resurrected, right? And so it's about trusting Jesus with your social life and being intentional in it. And here's an opportunity for your social life, to be empowered with Jesus. Show up, bring someone, you can keep going there. And then our Sunset Worship Yoga, I mean, again, free activity. We're not charging people a bunch of stuff right now. What we got going on around here, because we know we don't have the budget, is free opportunities for us to still be together, to worship Jesus, to love him and know him, to invite people to love him and know him and be the church. Next week, the fire pit, right? Again, an opportunity. I feel like when people are on the fire, we just slow down all of a sudden. And we tell stories and we remember who we are sometimes. What an opportunity to bring people into that. And so again, free activity. We can only afford free right now. Keep going here. And then we're also going to go up and we're going to stargaze up at Bob and Sandy's on 2 nights this summer as well. Again, free activity. We're just going to go up and hang out and be together and see the stars and remember that we have a God who, though he makes all of this, sees us, like really sees us. What a cool opportunity to bring somebody to that they might know the heart of God, right? So, you can go back and just like keep there for a second. Well, all these things, I don't know why. Okay, so all of these things that we like get up and I'm like, hey, here's what's going on, guys. Here's the newsletter. Here's all this really cool stuff happening. You might sit there and go like, oh, we must be fine because we're seeing the building get flipped over there and the building flipped over here and all this work is being done and we're starting all of these great ministries. Where's all this money coming from? We don't operate on those funds. Again, all of it goes away. All of it goes away if we don't make a commitment to tithing. We don't make a commitment to trusting God with that part of our lives that's about provision. And so obviously this is not the most popular thing and pastors are like, oh, I can't wait to preach on tithing. No, every pastor, like usually I will say, hates preaching on tithing, but it really is. I would just want to make sure this is stressed. It really is a crucial part of trusting Jesus with our lives, because I will be first to admit trusting Jesus with my finances is scary and it's been hard. And I don't know why. Right? I don't know why that's so scary and hard. It's Jesus. He has everything, right? He has everything. That's where this is going. That's where this chapter lands, right? And go ahead and grab that next slide. So none of these things will save us as a church. We sit there sometimes to think that, oh, Jesus will save us as a church, but he'll save us when we start to really personally trust him, because walking with Jesus is personal. Like, we do see stories where people fall, things close, it happens, right? And there's they're so complicated. There's so many reasons for it, but we really don't have a reason, right? Other than where I'm assuming is just a lack of knowledge that it looks like we have money, but we don't. I'm just like, the money is tied up in, it's meant for the building or it's meant to feed people. It's either grant money to feed people, or it's land sale money that has to go to building. So I just want to make sure that that's understood, and that tithes and offerings are an important part of keeping the church operational. Everything else goes away if we don't keep ourselves going. And Jesus's grace cannot be taken for granted. And clearly we see that when we're not doing well, right? I do believe in fish and loaves. The problem is we don't really have a lot of, even the smallest amount of fish and the smallest amount of loaves. Remember, Jesus says he can make an entire tree out of one tiny seed, right? Faith the size of a mustard seed can make a tree. We're shooting for mustard seed faith here in trusting God with the provision part of our lives, right? So you can grab that next. So I just explained that basically. But that we won't be around to serve the community if we can't stay open as a church by covering our basic monthly bills and costs. And that's just, you know that. Like, you have bills yourself. How many of you have ever had your electricity shut off? How many of you have ever had your water shut off? How many of you guys missed your mortgage payment? Come on. Like, we know that. That's just part of life. It's also part of the life at the church, too. So it's just those basic things. So you can grab that next one. So tithing, this is the thing. Tithing is two huge things for our walk with Jesus. And again, not easy, very long, hard road. I have walked this one. But to trust that he'll provide for us in our financial struggle and financial blessings. To trust that he's going to provide. Like, prior to this chapter, in the last one, we got to hear about Abel, right? Like, why was God so into Abel's offering over Cain's offering? Abel's offering was his first fruits. It was his first and his best, right? He was like, Jesus, if I give you my first and if I give you my best, I trust that I will get your best and I will get your first. Now, one, he definitely did that in Jesus, because Jesus is the first and Jesus is the best, and he gave us that. He gave us Jesus. But in provision, yes, he will give his first and his best. When we give our first and best, then he gives his first and best. And you might go, oh, that's not fair. I want his first and best first. You already got it. His name's Jesus, by the way. You already have it. So giving him your first and best, which is not easy, right? Not easy. And then also it teaches us to let go of what we think is ours and start to understand that it's his. Dude, that's hard, right? Have you ever worked really, really hard for something, right? And then you felt like, this is mine. I earned this. I worked hard for this. And the crazy part is this: even after you worked hard for it and you got it, it's still not yours. It's still by the grace of God that you even had the opportunity to earn something, right? It's still by the grace of God you have anything, because the reality is all of it is his. And so it's a really wild thing to turn and flip in your brain looking at stuff and say, this isn't mine, this is his. And I'm going to trust him like it's his, and not fear like the world and think that he's not going to provide more. And I will tell you, in my journey to tithe, that was very hard for me to take that journey, in the journey to tithe. And we'll circle back around, because we'll have these conversations every so often. But it is a journey, and I started out trusting him with a little bit at a time, and my giving increased, and and it is wild that what happened when I started giving. My PUD bill was paid, and my water bill was paid, and I was giving even in my poverty, and I say poverty not as world poverty, but when America looks at what they consider poverty, I would be considered that. But if you go on a mission trip and you travel anywhere else in the world, you're going to come back and realize that you're not the one in poverty. We're not the ones in poverty when you get out there and you see real poverty in the world. We're blind thinking that if we don't have, it's the keeping up with the Joneses part. If we don't have as much as our neighbor, we're poor. We always look at who has more than us, one level up, and then think that we're poor. Rarely do we ever see people who have actually nothing and realize how fortunate we are. And this is a big piece of why I really want to encourage people to go on the San Francisco trip and let Jesus use you in a really cool way. It's not about you going and just saying, okay, Lord, use me to change other people, but it's to be open-hearted and say, Lord, change me too. Change me too. Change me too. I need it. So this is, you can grab that next slide. Thank you. It says, poverty exists not because we cannot feed the poor, but exists because we cannot satisfy the rich. Maybe you've heard this quote, but it is spot on. It is where when you really go looking at the world on its poverty capacity, we can say, oh my goodness, I don't have as much as my neighbor does. Sure, you don't, but who's your neighbor? Like when it comes to the scope of the world, we have a ridiculous amount. And when we lose sight of that, it throws off the balance of everything on that list that was, what part of your life is the hardest to trust Jesus with? Because we are honestly wrapped up in some of the silliest things that we don't trust him with. Poverty exists not because we cannot feed the poor, because we cannot satisfy the rich. Somehow we're never satisfied. It's never enough. That's why it's hard to trust Jesus with our social lives, because it's just not enough. And we get to a point where we start to think that he's not enough. And that's a very dangerous place to be. So you can pop that question up there again. So what's the hardest part of your life to trust Jesus with? And again, there it is. Those things, if we're not intentionally trying to surrender these to him, it throws everything off balance. Now, when you look at finance and provision, you can see how that radically affects all of the other things, right? So when we feel like we got to keep up with the Joneses, to do that, right? Financially, we're pouring into all these other areas, and we do that sometimes out of fear that we don't think we're significant. If you come to know Jesus, you are significant to him. Other things will start to melt and lose power. Okay, so you can grab that next one. All right, I love this part. All of a sudden, our writer in verses 25 to 29 moves into this whole part talking about how you can grab that next slide. I just like that piece there. Oh, sorry, go back. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed a slide there. Okay, go back to the other one. Thank you. Okay, it says that it tells us that God can shake the heavens and the earth and all that he has created. So it talks about how Israel gathers at the mountain, right? And everyone's afraid of this mountain because they realize that corporately now he's holy, they're not. And then it talks about how God can shake everything and create it and shake it out of existence, right? But he cannot be shaken. And when you know that Jesus is that, when you know that, like, why not trust him with every single part? Like, why not trust him? Why not trust him with every area? Say, Lord, I am sick and tired of being afraid. I'm tired of being afraid of my health situations. I'm tired of being afraid in my social life that so-and-so is going to ruin my reputation and I'll never get back up and no one will ever be my friend. And whatever it is, right? It's time to realize that he can shake that all loose. He can shake all of it. None of it has that kind of power in his presence. And if you're in his presence, why would those things have power in your life? It comes down to fear. Fear just like hands power out to people. Don't fear and just start handing power to people, and they're not worthy of the power in your life. God and God alone is worthy of the power in your life, right? So I just love that beautiful part that our writer comes to closing on this piece in this chapter, telling us that he is the one who's ultimately in control. And he's a good father. There are consequences. He does discipline us. Do not take his grace for granted as a singular person like Esau or as a whole, as a community. And that's where he opened up saying, be at peace together and don't let anyone fall away. Step in and be encouraging to one another because we are all on a journey to Jesus. We're doing it together, and we all have different areas that are hard for us to really trust him in. So go ahead and grab that slide. So some of us are familiar with this guy. His name is Achan. You remember, and this was the character that came to my mind when looking at this, and that is Joshua and the troop, right, of the nation of Israel. They go up against Ai, and they're like, dude, like the odds are totally in our favor. Like we're gonna smash Ai. This is great. And they fall to Ai, and they're like, what is going on? How do we lose to these people? People died in battle. It shouldn't have been us. And then God's like, sift each other. I had told people earlier not to make score off of a previous city that they overtook, but somebody has stolen. And so they come through the camp and they come upon Achan. Achan, though he's one individual, he still has the power to affect a community, right? And he had gone ahead and plundered during a city, and he buried his belongings under his tent, right? And so Israel dealt with Achan, went back out into battle with Ai, and then they won. And here's the thing with that, is that sometimes we might say, okay, well, if everyone around here kicked it up and started tithing and we could pay our insurance bills and our PUD, then I don't have to. So if everyone else in the room starts to kick up tithing, if everyone else online starts to kick up the tithing, then I can be the Achan and I don't have to. This is the thing. God is personal. He's a personal and loving and good God, and he wants you to trust him in so many ways. Tithing is one of many ways, but the beautiful thing about it, and I will say, definitely my walk with Jesus, it was an area that I needed him to walk with me. It was a huge area of fear and an area of, it's easy to compare ourselves to everyone else. And it's hard to get past that and to trust him with it. It is a very hard, it's a hard walk. But we can't say, okay, well, everyone else will kick it in and then I just don't have to. Like, take time with Jesus. Like I always say, give as you feel led. Are you asking him to lead you? Are you asking him to lead you? Or are you just hoping that God is leading everybody else and you don't have to? Again, just as our writer told us, don't take God's grace for granted, right? We do that. It is so hard to not take God's grace for granted on this side of the cross. I totally get that. Again, I'm not claiming that this is an easy walk, but it is a very real walk for us to do. And this is the thing, we do it together. We do it together. Go ahead and grab that last slide. And so I'm going to just kind of leave this up here while I pray. And then we will we'll close out with a song. And but what is the hardest part of your life to trust Jesus with? Maybe finances and provision is not one of them for you. Maybe it is private life, or it's goals and ambition, or whatever it be. But this is the thing, is that Jesus wants all of it because he wants all of you, right? And he wants to really show what he can do in your life, as personally, but also with us together. Together, I think he does want us to serve the community and bring them in with a hot meal every week. I think he does want us to go into Longview and serve at the Chess House. I do believe he wants us to go to San Francisco and care for the people in the streets and learn a lot about him and his heart and his grace. I think that he wants to use us to minister and care for the schools in this town. I think he wants us to help and support people who may not even be a part of this church, but they are still a part of his heart, and therefore they should be a part of our heart. And I really, really believe that. And so if I really believe that, I have to walk that out personally in my life too. So let me pray for us, and Christine's going to come up and lead us in some final worship. So, Father, we just thank you for being a God who is full of so much grace. And Lord, maybe right now, the deepest part of our heart needs to repent for the fact that we do easily take grace for granted on this side of the cross. And Lord, we are living in a very, one of the most privileged areas of the world, that we don't see real poverty in the rest, and that you have called us to care for the rest. And so, Father, may we stop caring about having tickets to concerts or events or activities. May we stop caring about if we can keep up with or compete with those around us posting so many fun things online. Lord, may those things not have power to us, power in our lives, Lord. May you be the only one with that power. May we be able to let go of comparison and let go of fear that comes with that. May we start to trust you in your ways, Lord, that we have a peace that only you can give, that you do not give as the world gives, Lord. May we not have the fear of the world. May our lives look completely different in that. And Father, may we be inviting people to come and be part of your presence, Lord, that they might experience your peace in how our lives look different and how we look different, and that, Father, they come to know you too. So, Lord, will you teach us to be bold in that? And so, Lord, we give you this week, all of the things going on. May you work out in us the areas of our lives that we're not trusting you with. And may we start to lay those things down. Father, what you really want is a broken and contrite heart. And so, Father, may we give that. May our first and greatest offering right now be a broken and contrite heart. Reveal to us all of the ways in which you are wanting to heal us in that. So, Lord, may we give you these areas that we struggle to trust, and may we be healed in it. We love you and thank you in your precious name. Amen.
I wanted to share something.